my friend Connie Phelps, and she will, if Christine Boyko is with us now or not yet? Is Christine with us?
Not yet, Doctor.
Not yet. Okay, so Connie, I will give you the co-host in order to share your screen. So you could proceed.
Thank you, Tazier. Just a second, I thought I was second, so let me just take a quick second to, unless Fred wants to go first. Let's see here. Okay, I'm almost there.
So Connie, you will come first, and then we have Fred Bonner from Prairie View University in Texas. So he will join immediately after Connie.
Okay, just a second. Sorry, let me get to the PowerPoint part.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. This isn't quite, I hope I have the right one. Just Tazier, could you give me just a quick moment here? Okay, I think I'm sharing, and I think I now have the right thing. Okay, so good morning, well, hello everyone, wherever you are around the world, and thank you, Tazier, Nana, and I don't know if the Rijeka group is with us yet. Is Darko and Rijeka, are they on with us right now?
Yes, and
Okay.
they have a large number of people in the main theater in the University of Rijeka.
Okay, so thank you, Tazier. It's so wonderful to see everyone again, and even if it is on Zoom. Tazier asked me to talk about practices in gifted education in the USA, and I'm in kind of an unusual situation to talk about that because that's all I've been doing for like the last 25 years or so. Tazier mentioned in my introduction that before I came to my university position, I taught gifted children in the Wichita Public Schools. So I believe I had been teaching gifted students in my classrooms as a general education teacher prior to that, at the elementary and middle school level primarily. However, when I came to the university, I was hired as a single faculty program. So that meant I did everything. And I really felt well prepared based on my experiences in the Wichita Public Schools, because I worked with gifted children myself in all levels, K through 12. My primary assignment was in middle school, where, as Tazier said in my introduction, I worked with language arts. I actually taught gifted classes all day long. That's a practice that isn't very often seen. And in fact, they have a different practice now. But during my time, instead of going to their regular classes, the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, so, you know, adolescents, young adolescents, were in my classes. So they had English that was taught for gifted, and geography taught for gifted, civics, and so on. So I literally spent my entire day with gifted students, and I feel that that experience is quite unusual. The only thing that would be comparable to it would be what's called a self-contained school. And Wichita did have that, and I had planned to work there, but instead they put me in what was the state's largest middle school at the time. And I was the only person teaching gifted in the school. So I'm going to be a little bit more personal with my experiences this morning. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself because that is what I do. And I can't talk about gifted ed in the US without telling you what I do. So I taught regular education before I taught gifted ed. And I think that that's good. I think that teachers who start out in the regular education classroom have some advantages because they already know about students in schools and the organization, the politics, the pedagogy, and things like that. So when I was in Wichita, as I said, I taught about 5 classes a day with gifted, just gifted. They were small classes. And then after a couple of years, I started consulting at the elementary level where I just went to help identify. So that was a program in those schools that really wasn't very active. And because they called me in, they would have to cover my classes in my middle school, and I would help them identify gifted. And I'll tell you, that can be tough. You have to have the right people around you to identify gifted. And during my first meeting, I did get a phone call afterwards from what we call downtown. That would be like Wichita's the largest school district in Kansas, okay? So I got a phone call because the principal was upset with me. She had been known to say, "Over my dead body, will we identify a gifted student?" And we did identify one that morning. So I guess I was in trouble. She did go on a leave of absence later, and everything was fine with her. But they have a thriving gifted program. But I had to hold the line. I knew it was now or never, do or die. And and I did. And I just, Tazir talked about the myths of giftedness, you know, and this principal of the school actually shared a rather negative story of giftedness. And you'll hear that. You'll hear really bizarre things about gifted. And sometimes we just have to stay quiet, listen, and persevere, and really hold the line with what we know is best for kids, okay? So when I go through this today, all the pictures are from things I've done, including this first one. Most of them I used Saturday enrichment camps. So I know Croatia is fantastic with learning how to deliver appropriate types of experiences for high ability children, because I've been there and I've seen what you do, and I know it's amazing. And you know, I think it's the same everywhere. Wherever we are, we have to we have to find those cracks, you know, we have to find those small places. And that morning that I sat in the identification meeting, there was a tiny little crack there. When I would drive up to the school, at that particular school, and the teachers were watching students at playground, they would sort of come over to the fence when they saw me coming, and they say, "I think I have a gifted kid in my room." And so when you have some teachers who recognize that, you just need one. And it's helpful if you've got a psychology person who's on board with you to help deliver the assessment. So we'll talk about all of that. And this first photo here is from something I did on molecular gastronomy. This is a classroom across from my office at Emporia State. And I hosted a half-day Saturday enrichment camp a few years ago. And this is a local, what we call CSA, or a community farmer that would subscribe and deliver fresh products to your house. So he was part of that, and those are microgreens that they're preparing. So I'm getting sort of reacclimated to a Croatian group, and I thought a little a little refresher course would be good. And I'm so happy to say that in 2019, I had the great pleasure of attending not only the ECHA thematic conference in Dubrovnik, which is down here, where I met wonderful people like Zorana from Split, and this is Diocletian's Palace. I'm sure everybody in Croatia knows what these images are here. I was rather interested to see a road sign for, a wild pig, sorry. And so I actually stopped in the middle of the road and took that picture. Then of course, this is Dubrovnik too, famous in parts for Game of Thrones. And this is a scene from Game of Thrones with me there. And then climbing up the hill with Darko for coffee during my visit there. And it was a great pleasure to visit the University of Rijeka, and I greet everyone there. And let's move on a little bit. Oops, come on, there we go. Nana was absolutely amazing in setting up all these meetings. I wasn't there very long, maybe about 2 days. And so these are the places I went. And when I say you find the cracks, you find those small places that are connectors. They may seem isolated and unimportant, or what shall I say, lesser than you want them to be, but they are starting points and they are helping kids. And so the recreation center, for instance, the youth center, some of these photos come from there. And here's a photo up here in the top corner of some of the services that you're already doing in Rijeka and across the country. So, and these people that I met are very proud and very happy to be supporting gifted education. So I'm glad to see, Tizir, that we're able to contribute to that. So now I tell you a little bit about me. Where is Kansas? Where is that? Well, it's right here. And here's the, it's right in the center of the geographic center of the 48 contiguous states in the United States, literally in the geographic center. And so that's where I live. Does somebody need to ask a question? Okay, maybe somebody just needs to mute their mic. We are known for, we're not a real large city, but we are known for William Allen White, who is a Pulitzer Prize winning writer. We're the founder of Veterans Day, so we're very proud of our armed service people. And then points for anybody who knows the line, "There's no place like home." Anybody know that one? Hope you do. Okay, no one? Okay, put it in the chat if you know where that comes from. I bet you do know, but you may not know that you know. And then at Emporia State, we are known as a teacher's college. We started as a normal school, which began in Paris. The École Normales began there, and they spread to the United States. So this is another way. There were very small beginnings. I guess that's sort of the theme. Small beginnings can become lots more. So for instance, this one-room schoolhouse, if you watch Little House on the Prairie, you probably know about one-room schoolhouses. This sits on our campus. I drive past it every time I go to my office. It was moved from another location here, built in 1873. That's really old for us in the United States. And I know when you look at Diocletian's Palace and things like that, it's laughable to think that we consider this old. But we do, and here's the interior of that is kind of done in an authentic way. We also house the National Teachers Hall of Fame in the Teachers College, so those are awards that are given nationally, and here's part of that center. It's on the first floor of the building that I work in. And then one of the things I really love about inside, you can see these little dioramas here. So we really are about teaching, we're about students. The dioramas were inspired by the miniature rooms at the Chicago Art Institute. And so a retired teacher makes these of classrooms throughout American history. So again, you know, giftedness didn't really start until much later in the United States. However, when you think about the diversity of this one-room schoolhouse, there could be up to 17 different languages spoken in these small little buildings. So when we talk about cosmopolitanism and globalism, the United States was in an interesting position to deal with that from the get-go. So, you know, all we really have to do is look back at our history, and we did diversity because we had to. We had Italians and Germans and French and Polish and, you know, just, I don't know if we had Croatians or not, but we had a whole lot. Last on this slide is something a little more recent, the memorial to the fallen educators that was inspired by the Sandy Hook shootings. And this is the dark side of education and teaching. But, you know, in addition to commemorating Veterans Day and our armed services, teachers give their lives protecting children. And I'm sorry to say that, but here are the names, and they're added all the time. So this is outside the one-room schoolhouse, and I hope you'll come to Emporia sometime. And maybe we can do a symposium here to Taser when we start traveling more. You mentioned that this is part of the Teachers College. I received the first award for this as an endowed professor, and I really love working with my students who are out there working with gifted children every day. So that's why this is a little bit more personal. All right, so our topics this morning are who are they, because you can't really talk about gifted education without knowing who gifted are, and Taser's already mentioned all a number of the myths that persist. If there's one thing that we know about the myths of education, in a study that Don Treffinger did in Gifted Child Quarterly, after 25 years, those myths were still there, and we add to them. The pictures here are from the 3 Saturday enrichment camps that I did. This is molecular gastronomy, crime scene investigations. Sorry, that one's, well, I guess both of these are. The third one is entrepreneurialism 101. So what is it? I hope these pictures help give you an idea that it's not just acceleration, it's not just enrichment, it's meeting the needs of the children where they are. So then we have to look at best practices and figure out how do we do that, okay? All right, so who are they? So this is, I have permission for all, whoops, I'm sorry, it looks like this one is a little repetitive, but who are the gifted? The gifted that I believe are a little bit in the eye of the beholder. So we have to, let me see if what I want is on the next slide. If it will work. Okay. Sorry. It's not advancing like I want. Okay, well, I'll just stay here then. You know, gifted is about what's valued in a society. And so when you think about Croatia, I'm not sure what the values are in Croatia. I know that there are very welcoming people. I know there have been a lot of difficulties that they've faced in the country over the last decades. They're a very old country with many traditions. So what is it that's valued, you know? In the United States, things became valued back in the 1950s because of Sputnik and the space race with the Russians. So all of a sudden, America sort of had to flex its muscles, you might say, to compete with the Russians. And if there's Russians in here, I always feel a little uncomfortable talking about this part, but bear with me. You know, all of a sudden, educators and education in the United States had to up its game, you know, because of the space race, who would get to the moon first. Okay, so the Russians launched Sputnik, and our Secretary of Education, Sidney Marlin, at the time, conducted a very intensive investigation of giftedness. And it was introduced to Congress in 1971 and published in 1972. And the Marlin Report is actually the touchstone for gifted education, I believe, in the United States. Because for once, the United States, instead of having these little, scattered, unconnected dots, you might say, the dots started to, have a life of their own and connect and become something, take shape. The Marlin Report gave the shape through a definition of giftedness. Now, it's not a definition that you might normally think of in terms of go to the dictionary, look up giftedness. No, it was more about characteristics of giftedness. So there were like 5 of them. The first is always going to be, it seems, intelligence or academic ability. Creativity was second or third, depending on the year that Congress looked at this, because it continued to be discussed for the next 10 or 20 years. And performing arts, visual arts, leadership, and even sports originally was in that listing. Joe Renzulli sat on a committee and helped as a consultant to develop the literature base and the understanding of the Marlin Report. So what did the Marlin Report do? Well, the Marlin Report, in a sense, was a mandate or a direction for all of the states, because I think we had 50 of them. Maybe we didn't quite have 50 at that point, but all of the states, at least the continental United States, all had public school systems. And in the United States, the states decide how they're going to do things, but the federal government can give out laws and that the states sometimes do follow or don't, depending on what type of law it is. So in this case, we would say it was an unfunded mandate. So although the Marlin Report was published, there was never really any funding behind it. The only funding that we have in the United States is what's known as the Javits funding. And the Javits funding is what started the research centers throughout the United States, like the University of Connecticut, where Tizira studied. And that would be Joe Renzulli and others. Yale was another site, University of Virginia. So there were a number of those in the beginning. Connecticut has been very consistent, and Virginia also has been had longevity in that. So why were those centers important? Well, because there was a partnership between the K-12 teachers and university researchers. So the money went to those centers, and it funded research for gifted education across the country. So when the government gives a university center money, they expect it to be disseminated. So when you look at the University of Connecticut and the National Research Center for Gifted Studies, you'll see many, many, many resources that are absolutely free. And the reason they're free is that they are still getting Javits grants. I just attended the National Association for Gifted Conference, and I went to a session on what is the future of research, what's needed in research. It was by invitation, and I attended that. And so you can go to these websites and find all of their publications. So in a sense, they're very service oriented. Anyway, the gifted, to say who they are, the Marlin Report, which subsequently led to funding through the Javits funding and mandates in the states, is actually what started gifted education back in the 1970s. So again, I'm having a little trouble for some reason making my screen go. Let's see. Okay, so what is gifted education? Well, in the states across the all 50 now, every state is supposed to do something, but because we have separation of national and state in the United States, the states decide what the something is. So for instance, in Kansas, our state regulations say that it is intellectual or academic. Other states, like maybe Kentucky or someplace, might say it's all of the areas of the Marlin Report. And many states adopted all areas. Another distinction about Kansas is that it is funded. Not all states have funding for their programs, but Kansas does. And the way that they fund that is by training teachers. So the teacher training becomes very important through an institution like Emporia State University, which has been offering gifted courses for a very long time. And so when teachers receive that training, the school gets, maybe $30,000 from the state to pay for part of that teacher's salary. So that's how it's funded. Otherwise, it has to be other types of grants and things like that for the funding. So not only do all the states get to decide what aspect of giftedness, whether it's intellectual, creativity, visual arts, performing arts, or leadership, which of those they're going to address, and therefore that determines who's going to be in the gifted programs, because they have to be identified according to each state's mandate. Okay, so it gets even more diversified, because every school district can determine how they identify to meet that particular area. So for example, in Kansas, our area is academic or intellectual. Every single school district in the country can decide what tests they're going to use. Are we going to use the WISC? Are we going to use a creativity test or something else? Okay, do I need to answer a question? Is somebody wanting to? Okay, otherwise maybe somebody needs to mute their mic. Okay, so, you know, if you feel that you're sort of out there by yourself, you know, take heart, because the autonomy of making decisions at the local level is very good, but you really need some level of support from the ground up. So it's important to establish some laws at the national level that's going to help protect you, okay? And so this is what I mean. What qualities are valued in a society? Well, somebody decided at some point that intellectual ability was going to be the way in Kansas, although I suspect it originally included creativity. Then we have to decide how we measure the giftedness. And then we have to, if we're smart, going like Tizir started this morning, we're going to need to identify the myths, because those are in people's minds. And you can't work with people and influence people without understanding how they think. So if they think that giftedness is only for country club people or for people with money or the elite, or if they think that gifted kids are so smart that they don't need any help, those are roadblocks that you need to overcome. As you're talking to legislators, educators, parents, teachers, those are the people that surround us as stakeholders. And they can, sometimes we just really need to address those areas. Okay, so best practices. This is one of the last things I want to talk about. And there are some principles of that have been published by the World Council for Gifted and Talented in 2021. I happen to serve, and I'll put the link in the chat after, and I was going to put it on the slide, but I'll put the link in the chat so you can go right there. It's free. It's downloadable. And so I was one of 2 people selected from the United States, along with Sheila Gallagher, to serve on this committee that started, I think after 2017, I believe. So we talked about it in Sydney during the conference there. And actually, I suggested during sort of a planning meeting that maybe we think about standards, because I've worked a lot with standards in the United States for giftedness, both in my state and at the national level. And, you know, standards are a little scary to some countries because, you know, if you have a lot of different countries, and the reason that they're scary is that nobody really wants things imposed on them. They want a certain amount of freedom to make their own decisions for what's best for an educational community at the local level. But you still need something to go on. And I'm happy to say that Norma Haffenstein from the University of Denver, who is actually an Emporia State graduate and started the Rick Center for Gifted Children in Denver, a fantastic place if you ever have the opportunity to visit. She is the one who spearheaded this committee and the World Council, along with Julia Roberts and Tyler Clark and representatives. I think there's at least one other person on this call who was on that committee as well. And we had a number of meetings to discuss questions, to talk about how do we do gifted in our country. And many countries, I heard this in Africa in particular over and over, well, you know, we really don't do anything, you know. And so we're hoping that these principles for professional development will help countries who want to strengthen their programs. And I want to say that at no point in time do I wish to say that the United States does it best or does it right. We just been at it for a while, and we have challenges just like anybody else, but we also have been fortunate to have some resources. So I think we can learn from Croatia equally. So when it comes to the 10 principles, there are a lot of really good, it's a framework. It's a framework for you to consider. And there is a research phase that is published with it, not exhaustive, but suggestive to kind of give you places to go for additional information. I will put the link in the chat. Okay, this is one of my favorite best practices because it's very comprehensive. And I know Tazir actually taught me this a long time ago. Tazir is always ahead of the curve. And and when Renzulli Learning first came out, I attended one of his symposiums on it. And Tazir, would you know that I've done grant-based work with them these past several years? This became free during the pandemic. It's not free, there is a subscription to it, but they will always give you a trial period. So if it's something in that, you know, you need something that's remote and rigorous and robust, this has a lot of benefits to it. And I'm going to try to wrap up quickly here, but I'll spend just a couple of moments since this isn't as widespread maybe in the United States as it might be, but what it really is a compilation of best practices, because Joe Renzulli has been publishing about giftedness for a very long time. And the profiler, for instance, was actually the interestalizer once upon a time. So what they've done is to take a lot of best practices and pack them into this system, which is, as I said, very robust. And there's far more there than you could ever need. The nice thing about it is that if you're planning instruction for students, you can either have a wizard put it together for you, or you can do it manually using the various tools here. So I believe this is something I did for myself, maybe my profiler, you know, like what am I interested in? What are my learning styles? What are my subject area strengths? What are my preferred modalities of learning? And it takes all of those well, there's like 4 areas, and in moments, just, it takes very little time to do the profiler. I know Trevor Tebbs is on the call, and I would love to see, I love what Trevor does with his chandelier system, which is so comprehensive and interactive. But this is good because it can be used in schools. Trevor, and I'm trying to make a comparison with you. I'm just saying yours is very comprehensive. This one really is about how you plan instruction for gifted. And so here's enrichment activities and projects that can develop from. So can you see the progression? This is who I am. This is what would benefit me. And this is what I can do with it. And so, for instance, whatever this one was, in creativity training, there were 134 online activities that would relate to this particular profile. So I'll give you a link for that too in the chat. And here I am, and I'm going to turn it, there's lots of ways you can reach me. The best way is always email. If you actually, for some reason, should call me, it would generate an email with a voice message to it. I'm on Facebook Messenger. I can make phone calls internationally that way that are free. And same thing with WhatsApp, and there it is. So thanks, Dazier. I hope this has been helpful, and I'll put those links in the chat. Okay.
Thank you so much, Connie, for this interesting presentation. And as you see, Connie started with my criticism and my review about myths and realities in gifted education, but this is what, the field is suffering. And she gave us a very clear example about networking and cooperation with different countries, talking about Croatia and, of course, France and other countries in the Middle East. So thank you again. And she has addressed what we call operational definition for the giftedness, because sometimes you can go to the more comprehensive definition, as Renzulli did, but she said, okay, I will focus on the main behavioral characteristics. And then based on that, I will put more effort in order to find the right programs for these kids. And then she concluded with a number of practices here and there, including the ones in Croatia and Rijeka in particular. And she ended with what we call Renzulli learning system, because nowadays we are talking about digitalization. And this system was established a long time ago. And it was meant to be the right platform for gifted students and their teachers. As you know, the teachers are overloaded and they need the right resources, and the Renzulli learning system could offer these resources.